Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. Let me ask you something real. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you loved, and for a second you couldn't recognize them? You couldn't name it, but something shifted, her touch felt rehearsed, her smile delayed, like she was present but not truly there. And you told yourself, maybe it's stress. Maybe I'm just being insecure. But the pit in your stomach didn't lie. Infidelity doesn't always announce itself in lipstick stains and late-night texts. Sometimes it whispers. In silence, in routine, in the way she suddenly starts locking her phone, in the way she asks you if you're okay when she's the one pulling away. And what hurts the most is not the betrayal. It's the fact that she made you question your own reality, your own intuition. This video is not about blame. It's not about painting women with one brush. It's about insight and protection, because many men miss the signs not because they're blind, but because they're trusting. And trust, when manipulated with psychological precision, becomes the perfect hiding place. Today, we're going to uncover 5 psychological tricks wives may use to hide cheating. Not to stir paranoia, but to awaken awareness, because the truth doesn't destroy relationships, secrets do. And when you learn how these emotional sleights of hand operate, you'll never look at avoidance, guilt, or extra kindness the same way again. So let's start with something subtle, something that happens right under your nose. The first psychological trick is what I call the emotional redirect. It's when she makes you the subject of suspicion, not to accuse necessarily, but to confuse. She might ask, "You've been distant lately, is everything okay?" Or even throw in, "Are you seeing someone at work?" At first you might feel startled, even guilty. You start reflecting, scanning your own behavior, wondering if you've done something wrong. But what's actually happening is emotional misdirection. You see, when someone is carrying a secret, especially one loaded with guilt, they often subconsciously or very consciously shift attention away from themselves. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's a survival instinct. She knows you trust her, and that trust becomes a curtain she can pull closed behind her. So instead of facing your growing intuition, she distracts you with your own reflection. Now, this doesn't mean every woman who checks in on you emotionally is hiding something. Far from it. But there's a difference between genuine concern and the kind of questioning that feels like it's trying to anchor you into doubt. It's almost like a mental chess move. She sacrifices a pawn, your confidence, to protect the queen, her secret. And here's the irony. The more faithful you are, the more loyal, the more you're likely to internalize the blame. That's the emotional trap. You start showing up better, more present, more romantic, because you want to prove that you're not the problem. Meanwhile, she watches you try to fix what she already broke and says nothing. Let's sit with that for a moment. When emotional manipulation is cloaked in concern, it feels intimate, but it's actually a wall dressed as a window. And if you don't know how to tell the difference, you'll spend months trying to fix a relationship that's being unraveled behind your back. Now, the second psychological trick is what I call preemptive overload. This one's clever. Imagine she suddenly becomes extra affectionate, suddenly interested in your day, your schedule, your feelings. She might even initiate sex more often, cook your favorite meals, plan date nights. You're flattered, of course, maybe even relieved, especially if things were rocky for a while, but the timing feels off. This isn't guilt, it's control, because what she's doing is covering the scent trail. She's giving you so much emotional stimulation, you don't think to ask what she was doing last Thursday night when she said her meeting ran late. She's rewriting the emotional script of your relationship, so that if anything ever does come out, your brain will reject it. But she's been so sweet lately, you'll say, she's been really trying, there's no way. This is psychological insulation. She's building an emotional cushion so that if the truth lands, it won't shatter the story she's been feeding you. And again, this isn't just about cheating. It's about protecting a narrative, because once someone steps outside the lines of integrity, they have to either come clean or perform. And performance, when done well, can feel realer than reality. You know the difference between a kiss that says "I love you" and a kiss that says "don't look too close." Maybe not at first, but your gut does. That's why your chest feels heavy even when everything looks okay. That's why your body tenses when she touches you a little too sweetly, because your nervous system knows what your heart doesn't want to admit. Love doesn't need to prove itself. Guilt does. So what do you do when affection feels like a disguise? You pay attention to patterns, not moments. Has the affection been consistent, or did it spike after something felt off? Has she become more physically available, but less emotionally open? Is she giving, but not sharing? Because when intimacy becomes a performance, the first thing that vanishes is vulnerability. And you, as her husband, feel that difference. You just don't always have the words for it. There's a tragic kind of beauty in how hard men try to believe in love, especially when it's their own. You want to believe that maybe things are finally getting better, that the affection is sincere, that her energy is returning because you did something right. But in some cases, that burst of warmth is not love returning, it's the cover-up arriving. And then there's a third trick: strategic emotional openness. This is when she tells you a vulnerable story. Maybe from childhood, maybe about an ex, something that makes you feel closer, bonded. You think, wow, she's finally letting me in. But what's really happening is deflection by connection. Because if you're emotionally connecting, you're less likely to be suspicious. She feeds you intimacy in carefully measured doses to create the illusion of transparency. But what she's not telling you is what you really need to hear. What she didn't say about last weekend. What she's not sharing about her texts. What she won't explain about the sudden changes in her schedule. You see, people don't hide things by building walls anymore. They hide things by building more doors. They give you access to parts of them you've never seen so that you stop looking at the parts they've quietly closed off. It's not always malicious, but it is practiced. When someone is trying to protect a double life, they become masters of half, truths wrapped in soft stories. And if you're the kind of man who listens, who cares, who genuinely wants to understand her deeper, then you're the perfect audience, because you'll sit there, touched by her story, and never notice that the truth is what she never said. And that's where we'll pause for a breath. You know, there's something haunting about being in the same room with someone and still feeling completely alone. She's sitting right next to you, but her energy is somewhere else. She laughs at your jokes, but her eyes scan the room. And when you ask her what's wrong, she says, "Nothing, I'm just tired." Again, that brings us to the fourth psychological trick: emotional flatlining. This one is especially painful because it feels like indifference, and that indifference can be easily mistaken for distance, for burnout, for boredom. But in some cases, it's not that she doesn't feel, it's that she's emotionally spent somewhere else. You see, emotional cheating usually starts long before physical cheating does. And when someone has begun investing in another person, whether that's through texts, late night calls, emotional validation, or sexual tension, they begin withdrawing from the person they used to confide in. You. It's subtle. She stops asking how your day went, stops reacting when you're upset, stops initiating conversations unless they are about logistics or chores. And when you ask for closeness, she may say, "I just need space." Or worse, "Why do you always want to talk when I'm tired?" What's really happening here is the rerouting of intimacy. She's no longer bringing her emotional needs to you because those needs are being met somewhere else. And the saddest part, you still show up, you still try, you still believe that maybe if you just give her a little time, she'll come back around. But what you're actually doing is watering a plant she already pulled the roots from. And when you finally confront her about the growing distance, she might say something like, "You're imagining things," or "You're being too sensitive." And that, my friend, is where the fifth trick begins, gaslighting through rationality. This one is especially clever because it doesn't look like manipulation, it looks like logic. You say, "Something feels off." She says, "You're always overthinking." You point out a change in her behavior. She says, "So now I can't have a bad day without being accused." And you start to wonder, am I the one being controlling? Am I paranoid? But gaslighting isn't always about screaming or drama. Sometimes it's calm, gentle, almost soothing. That's what makes it so disorienting. It uses your own empathy against you, your desire to be fair, to give her the benefit of the doubt, to avoid being that guy who accuses without proof. So you silence your gut. You tell yourself, "She's right. I am being insecure. I just need to trust her more." But trust is not about ignoring your instincts. Trust is not silence. Trust is a two-way mirror, not a one-way wall. And when someone uses your love as the weapon to disarm your suspicion, that's not trust. That's emotional warfare. Let's slow down here. None of these tricks work unless you love her. That's the hardest part to swallow. Because it's your loyalty, your faith, your commitment that makes them effective. She knows you're not a man who walks away easily. She knows you're the kind who fights to keep the family together, who believes in second chances, who wants to believe the best in the woman he married. So she doesn't need to hide behind lies. She hides behind the truths you already believe, that she's tired, that she's overwhelmed, that she's trying, and maybe at some level all of those things are true, but they're not the whole truth. Because here's what nobody tells you. Emotional cheating doesn't always start with desire. Sometimes it starts with resentment, or boredom, or the quiet ache of feeling invisible. She doesn't go looking for someone else to love. She goes looking for someone else to see her. And when that emotional door opens, she walks through it, even if you were standing at the front door the entire time, waiting for her to come home. So what do? You stop asking for proof. You start listening to patterns. You stop arguing with her words, and start watching her energy. Because energy doesn't lie. When someone's words and their presence don't match, it's not your job to find the perfect question. It's your job to find your center. You don't need to accuse. You don't need to beg. You don't need to explode. You need to return to yourself. To the man who knows what intimacy feels like, and more importantly, to the man who knows what it feels like to be left in the dark. Because what makes betrayal so destructive isn't just what they did, it's that they let you feel crazy for sensing it. They made you doubt your own emotional intelligence, and that, my dear listener, is what you must reclaim. Your clarity, your stillness, your knowing, because once you stop explaining your gut away, you'll see everything that was hidden in plain sight. And what happens when you finally start trusting yourself again? You begin to notice the way her eyes flinch when yours linger too long. You notice the slight delay before she answers your questions. The way her stories come dressed in just the right amount of detail, enough to satisfy your curiosity, but not enough to satisfy your soul. And in those moments you realize that she's not just keeping secrets, she's shaping a reality where the truth no longer lives. There's something deeply painful about realizing that the person you sleep next to is managing you, not connecting with you. That instead of being her safe space, you've become her audience. And everything she says, every tear, every smile, every well-timed vulnerability, it's all designed to keep you just far enough from the truth while close enough to keep her life intact. And you ask yourself, how did we get here? It didn't start with betrayal. It started with small withdrawals. She stopped telling you about the people in her life. She started locking her phone. She began taking longer showers, longer walks, longer silences. And when you asked her about it, she called you insecure. But now, looking back, you understand. She was building a version of herself that could exist without you. Not because she hated you, but because she was trying to feel something that had nothing to do with you. Cheating is not always about sex. It's about identity. It's about becoming someone else, someone more alive, more seen, more desired. And when that transformation starts, the partner at home becomes a mirror she doesn't want to look into anymore. Not because you've changed, but because she has, and seeing your love, your patience, your steadiness only makes her feel the weight of what she's hiding. That is the most terrifying part for a man who loves deeply, because your love becomes the very thing that pushes her away. Not because it's not enough, but because it's too much, too honest, too pure, too confronting. It reflects back her guilt. And so she creates distance, not with arguments, not with drama, but with absence in presence. She's there. But she's not really there. You feel it in the way she rushes to say good night, in the way she pulls away after making love, in the way she looks at you, not with affection but with apology, not the spoken kind, the silent kind. The one that says, "You still don't know, and I'm grateful for that," and so you begin to shrink. You stop asking questions. You stop reaching out. You stop showing up fully because deep down you don't want to know. You don't want to shatter the illusion. You tell yourself, maybe if I just give it time, things will go back to normal, but this isn't a season. It's a shift, and it's already happened. The truth is, many men don't confront infidelity because they're afraid of what it will say about them. Not just about their relationship, but about their masculinity, their worth, their ability to satisfy, protect, keep. And that's the lie that keeps so many in emotional captivity. If she cheated, then maybe I wasn't enough. But let me tell you something, with every fiber of my experience working with couples around the world, cheating is not always about the person being cheated on. Often, it's about the one who felt lost within themselves and went looking for a mirror in someone else's eyes. You may have been loving, supportive, consistent, and still she may have chosen chaos over connection. Not because you lacked, but because she did. And if you're hearing this right now, and your chest feels tight, and your memories are spinning, and you're not sure whether to be angry or heartbroken, I want you to know this. You are not crazy. You are not broken, and you are not alone. There is nothing weak about being blindsided by the one you trusted most. In fact, it speaks to your character, your loyalty, your belief in love, and those are not things to be ashamed of, they are things to be honored. But now it's time to do something brave, not angry, not vengeful, but brave. It's time to stop asking what she's hiding and start asking yourself what you've been ignoring. Because sometimes the most dangerous betrayal isn't the one committed by another, but the one we commit against ourselves when we choose silence over self-respect. You don't need to become suspicious, you need to become conscious. You don't need to control her, you need to reclaim you. Because when a man starts walking in clarity, the lies around him begin to stumble. When a man returns to his own emotional intuition, no trick, no manipulation, no staged affection can hold its power. And when you do finally confront her, not in rage, but in stillness, you won't be looking for a confession. You'll be looking for closure. You know, people often think that the hardest part of discovering betrayal is the act itself, the affair, the messages, the lies. But really, it's the aftermath that hurts the most. It's waking up beside someone and realizing you no longer recognize the way they breathe beside you. It's looking at the woman you loved and realizing you're not looking into her anymore. You're looking at her. And what you once saw as home now feels like a stage. That's the final layer of this manipulation, not an action, but a consequence, the unspoken psychological trick where you're left questioning reality itself. It's when you no longer trust your memories. You wonder if that smile she gave you last week was real or rehearsed, if her compliments were love or damage control. If every moment you held her hand was hers too, or just yours, and that fracture, that disorientation, it doesn't go away easily. Because when someone rewrites the story while you're still living in it, the deepest betrayal is not just what they did, it's that they made you feel foolish for not seeing it sooner. And so you grieve two things, the relationship and your own blindness. But let me say this to you as gently and firmly as I can. You were not foolish. You were loyal, you were invested, you believed, and that is never a weakness. It is your greatest strength. It is the proof that you showed up with your whole heart, that you trusted, that you stayed open even when love became uncomfortable. And now is the moment you begin again, not by declaring war, not by becoming cold, not by creating walls taller than your pain, but by returning to the man you were before the confusion began, the man who trusted his gut, who paid attention to energy, who wasn't afraid to name what felt off, who honored love not just when it was easy, but when it required discernment. Because here's the truth most people will never say out loud. When women cheat, it often doesn't look like deception. It looks like detachment, it looks like overfunctioning, it looks like the perfect wife. She smiles at your mother. She keeps the house in order, she kisses you goodbye and tells you to drive safe, and all the while you think, I must be imagining things, but you're not. You're just a man who was taught to value peace over confrontation, stability over truth, and now it's time to unlearn that. The end of denial is painful, but it's also sacred. It's the place where a man becomes whole again, where he stops doubting his intuition, where he learns to live with his eyes open, not in paranoia, but in presence. And if you're still here, still listening, still with me, I want to speak to you. Not the version of you who was betrayed, not the version of you who is angry, but the version of you who is ready. Ready to stop twisting yourself into a shape that fits someone else's lies, ready to reclaim your peace. Your time, your attention. You don't need to watch her phone. You don't need to follow her car. You need to listen to you. That moment when your chest tightens, that moment when the affection feels forced, that moment when her laughter is a little too loud, a little too deliberate. Those are not accusations. They are invitations, invitations to inquire, to clarify, to ask, not out of fear, but from a place of self-honoring. And if the truth comes out, and it often does, you'll know you didn't betray yourself in the process. You'll know you didn't shrink, you didn't settle, you didn't ignore what your heart was whispering just to keep a version of her that was already gone. Because sometimes what breaks you also builds you. You're not just recovering from betrayal, you're recovering from the silence you sat in to avoid confronting it. And on the other side of that silence, a man with a clearer voice, a stronger presence, a sharper eye. So whether you stay and rebuild or walk away and heal, do it from wholeness, not suspicion, not revenge, but from the grounded awareness that love must be mutual, sacred, and honest. Anything less is not love. It's performance, and you're done being part of the act. You are the truth now, the mirror, the fire. And you will no longer be manipulated by kindness, confused by touch, or silenced by stories meant to distract you from your own knowing. Thank you for watching. If this spoke to your heart, share your experience in the comments. You never know who else is quietly living in the same confusion, needing your voice to say, I went through this too. Like this video. Subscribe for more emotional clarity and relationship truth. And remember, the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves to protect the image of someone we've already lost. But the most beautiful freedom is when you finally stop and choose you.